I think that's why it was so baffling to me and so head scratching when the news came out that Jerry Jones was retaining Mike McCarthy to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. There's two ways to look at this, and I understand both ways. So one way to look at this situation is, well, Mike McCarthy is one of, if not the winningest coach that the Dallas Cowboys have ever had in the regular season. There is no question that Mike McCarthy is a very successful coach when discussing the regular season. And on top of that, there's no way that you can say that Mike McCarthy isn't a successful coach when you look at just the tenure of his career. I mean, regular season and postseason included, he's 178 and 113 as a record. Oh, and 2 as a record. So that's 61%. You win 61% of your games. So I'm not saying that Mike McCarthy is trash. Please do not hear me say that. Mike McCarthy is one of the best regular season coaches in football right now, and that football is seen for a while. And when you look at the success of Dallas has had success in terms of the regular season with Mike McCarthy. I mean, 3 straight years he took them to the playoffs. 3 straight years you've seen kind of an elevation with Dak Prescott. It makes sense. And in that case, I understand completely why you would understand and agree with bringing back Mike McCarthy. On top of that, nobody wants to start over. Nobody wants to force themselves into a rebuild. I understand that there are some teams that need to rebuild, but if you don't need to rebuild or you don't feel that you need to rebuild, the last thing you want to do is jumpstart a rebuild that doesn't need to happen. So I understand that in that sense. And when you do something as paramount as firing a coach, not saying that it's going to essentially start a rebuild, but though that is kind of the first domino to fall in a lot of instances. Firing a coach and usually firing a coaching staff means you're getting rid of one regime and bringing another. So it's not always as simple as rebuild or not, but that is kind of like the first domino. And if you're the Dallas Cowboys, I understand that that's not something that you would probably want to do. I get it. Nothing. And I would feel kind of weird if the Dallas Cowboys, even being a Washington fan, seeing as though I'm from the DMV area, born and raised, I would feel kind of weird if Dallas felt that they needed to jumpstart a rebuild, especially seeing as though they just won the division this year. So on that side, I understand. I understand completely why you would be okay and understand bringing back Mike McCarthy. But on the other side, and this side is a little more complicated. I talk about this a lot on the podcast. It is expectations. And there are different expectations for different teams. The expectations for the 49ers, for the Ravens going into the season, or let's say halfway through the season, is much different than someone like Washington or someone like the Carolina Panthers. Those expectations are different because you look at the level of competition that your team plays, you look at the level of fight that your team has, and you look at the level of talent that your team has, and you start to assess, okay, where are we in the talent scale? And sometimes you're at the bottom of the scale, sometimes you're at the top. All that goes into building expectations and ultimately sometimes changing expectations. The biggest reason why I said that it was head scratching that they brought back Mike McCarthy is because I listen to Jerry Jones. I hear what Jerry Jones says. And this move directly contradicts almost everything that Jerry Jones says. Jerry Jones is undoubtedly the most famous owner probably in sports. Because of how visible he is, because of how visible he makes himself, because he is the owner of the quote unquote America's team, that pretty much makes him the most popular owner in sports. I challenge you to name me another owner that is more recognizable than Jerry Jones. And Jerry Jones, being the most recognizable owner, being the quote unquote face of Dallas, being as boisterous as he is, seeing as though he goes on a new or radio show weekly. Jerry Jones has had a very consistent stance to the state of the Cowboys, to where he wants the Cowboys to be, to his goal for his team, the thing that he owns. Remember, I started this episode talking about ownership. Jerry Jones has been very consistent that being the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, the expectation is championships. He wants championships. And he feels that if his team does not put themselves in the ring for a championship, then the season is a failure. Then he quote unquote can't sleep at night. That statement alone, which might I add, has been very consistent with Jerry Jones. That statement puts an uber amount of expectations on the Dallas Cowboys because you're the owner. The owner is saying this. This is what the owner wants. And ultimately, the owner is the one that pays the bills. So I listened to that. And on top of listening to that, I know what the expectations is in Dallas. There's a reason why Stephen A. Smith is so famous for his Dallas Cowboys reactions. There's no reason why there's a reason why every year when the total value of teams come out, because it's a yearly thing, how the Dallas Cowboys is number one usually when we talk about American sports. There's a reason for that. So I understand the expectations because they have been told to us on several occasions by the owner. You see, you can't come in here and expect to make grandiose changes to my podcast because you don't have ownership. You don't own this. You can make suggestions, but at the end of the day, because I'm the owner, I'm the one that has the say so in what happens and what doesn't happen. Same thing with Jerry Jones. I can't expect someone to come and tell Jerry Jones how to run the Dallas Cowboys because he's the owner. So let me get back on track because I feel like I'm kind of weighing off. We talked about Mike McCarthy being one of the best regular season coaches in football, at least currently coaching. And we talked about the success that Dallas has seen with Mike McCarthy these last, 3 years? They've made the playoffs all 3 years. But I listened to Jerry Jones. And Jerry Jones says that it's championship or bust in Dallas. It's not regular season or bust. It's not have an incredible regular season, play better than anyone would expect in the regular season, have an MVP candidate in the regular season or bust. It's championships or bust. And also, what we've seen from Mike McCarthy is he's one of the best regular season coaches that's currently coaching. He's won 61% of his games. He also has a very underwhelming postseason record. He's not that good with the postseason. In fact, he's had Aaron Rodgers majority of his career. And shouts out to Marcus, the host of the GOAT Talk podcast. He also has another podcast. In fact, I'm not going to disrespect Marcus like that. I think it's Protect Our Women Hoopers podcast or something like that. But he had a very good comparison about Josh Allen being Aaron Rodgers. And to a certain extent, I can kind of see it. But in that, Mike McCarthy was his coach. And there gets to a point where your success or lack of success with the surrounding pieces start to get put into question. How is it that you've had somebody that is widely considered one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever put on a pair of cleats? Yet and still, that quarterback has only been to one Super Bowl, not just one. He's only been to one. He did win it, but he's only been to one. And on top of that, we talk about Mike McCarthy in these last 3 years. Well, these last 3 years, they have not even made it to the conference final or conference championship. In fact, I don't think they've made it to the last time they made it to the conference championship. Stephen A. Smith so eloquently said it. They have, and when I say they, I mean Dallas. Google wasn't a thing. Google. So Jerry Jones says that championships are the expectation in Dallas, and rightfully so. Yet and still, the head coach that you have pretty much vouched for and brought back has not shown a championship pedigree outside of 1 year. Not just a championship pedigree, he hasn't shown a playoff pedigree. The saying is, you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink. Well, for Mike McCarthy, you can lead them to the playoffs, but you can't help them win games. You see, the famous critiques about Mike McCarthy is what? Clock management, game preparation, and ultimately, he can't get you over the hump in the playoffs. And when I say that those critiques have followed Mike McCarthy majority, if not all of his career. So when I say it's head scratching, understand Jerry Jones' actions contradict his words. Because if your actions say that it's championship or bust in Dallas, if your actions say that the only expectation in Dallas is to compete for a championship, if your expectations say all you care about are championships, then your actions would never endorse Mike McCarthy, because Mike McCarthy has never shown that championship pedigree outside of 1 year. You look at this season. This was the year. The usuals, even though they're still in the playoffs, but the usuals were down. We don't know what the hell's went on with the Eagles. The Kansas City Chiefs are struggling. Buffalo Bills, they were struggling majority of the year. In the NFC, I mean, it was the 49ers, and outside of that, it was a crapshoot. So this was the year. Dallas, everything about Dallas spelled at least conference or at least NFC championship. You had one of the best offenses in the regular season. You had one of the best defenses in the regular season. Dak Prescott, for majority of the year, was playing at an MVP level. CeeDee Lamb emerged as one of, if not the best wide receivers in the league this year. You still had Michael Parsons. You still had DeMarcus Lawrence. You still had Deron Bland. You still had Stephon Gilmore. Dallas, I think, won 13 games this year. Everything was lining up for Dallas to at least compete for an NFC championship. And if you compete for an NFC championship, 9 times out of 10, that means you're a Super Bowl caliber team. When I look at all the teams remaining, outside of maybe 1 or 2, I don't see any team that couldn't win a Super Bowl outside of maybe 1 or 2. Dallas was in that ring. But what happened? I'm not just talking about the loss. I talked about that ad nauseum last episode. What happened was all those critiques, all those skepticisms, all those issues that followed Mike McCarthy majority of his career reared its ugly head in the playoffs this year. Again, might I add. Dallas looked so unprepared against the Green Bay Packers, both offensively and defensively. Dak Prescott decided to have his worst game of the year in the playoffs. The defense looked shell-shocked. Michael Parsons looked, I didn't remember he was on the team. All those criticisms reared its ugly head in the playoffs. So when Jerry Jones says, all I care about is Super Bowls, well, the head coach that you have has proven at this point that he doesn't know how to win Super Bowls. Because trust me, I'm not taking away from that one Super Bowl that he has with Aaron Rodgers, but I'm also saying, how the hell do you only have one Super Bowl and you had Aaron Rodgers? Mike McCarthy is an example of something else, but I'm not going to go there. I don't want to take this episode left quick. But Mike McCarthy continuing to get an opportunity in Dallas is an example of something. If you know what it is, you know what it is. But what I'm saying is this, before I move on. Mike McCarthy has shown and proven that if you want success in the regular season, he's your guy. And for some teams, that is acceptable. Some teams would love to have a 10, 11 win season. Some teams haven't seen a 10, 11 win season in decades. So if that is your goal, then Mike McCarthy is your guy. But if it's not, if your goal is championships, like Jerry Jones continues to reiterate, this retaining Mike McCarthy, especially when, and I talked about this an episode or two ago, when the coaching free agency market is booming right now. You have two coaches, just multiple, but at least two coaches, three coaches that you know can win. And that's Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, and Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh just won a national championship. He also took the 49ers to the Super Bowl. Pete Carroll has multiple national championships at USC. He also has 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 win with Seattle. And we know about Bill Belichick and his reign. And that's also what's so head scratching. This is a very rare time for football right now. This is a very rare time in terms of coaching free agency, because you're never going to get 3 names this big, this noteworthy on the market at the same time. And all 3 of them have expressed interest in being a head coach continuing this year. So the fact that you think Mike McCarthy gives you a better opportunity to win a Super Bowl than someone like Bill Belichick, than someone like Pete Carroll, than someone like Jim Harbaugh, than someone like Raheem Morse is interesting to me. Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.